Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Less Alone, More Together, The Power of Consortia to Expand Access and Resources While Lowering Costs, which is sponsored by OverDrive Academic. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars or watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers or to share any comments. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you'd like or would like to be addressed. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Josh.
Thank you so much. Hello and happy Wednesday. I'm Josh Garcia, Marketing Manager at OverDrive, and I'm excited to kick things off by introducing our speakers and walking you through today's agenda. We have the incomparable Meg Backus, Executive Director of the Northern New York Library Network, here to share her consortium's experience with OverDrive and Libby as a digital resource. Also, Tracy Egan, our OverDrive account manager, will provide context on the challenges academic libraries face today and discuss how OverDrive supports digital library collections. Next slide, please. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. We'll start with an introduction of the current landscape of digital libraries, the role of providers like OverDrive, and the unique challenges academic librarians encounter. Next, we'll explore the value of consortia on easing workloads. Our goal at the end of this is to show how consortia simplify services and help us feel less alone while achieving more together. We'll spotlight Northern New York Library Network as Meg and Tracy dive into the consortium's operations and share data-backed insights from their collaboration with OverDrive. And finally, we invite you to join the conversation. Submit your questions and we'll address as many questions as time allows at the end. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tracy to get us started. Tracy, great to see you.
Thanks, Josh. And hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. As Josh mentioned, my name is Tracy Egan. As an account manager at OverDrive, I work with colleges and universities of all sizes to maximize their budget and build a digital collection in Libby. I'm one of 3 people on an account team. I call myself a generalist because I can assist generally with all areas of support. But I'm grateful that I have 2 specialists on my account team. One is technical support, and the other is a team librarian. So with OverDrive accounts, you're assigned a team of 3 people to support you. Well, that's information about me, but let's talk a little bit about OverDrive. At OverDrive, we say that we offer the best digital book catalog for all audiences. And we're going to talk a little bit more about content after this slide. Within our catalog, we have millions of titles, languages, over 100 languages. We do have a presence across the globe and about 30,000 and growing publishers. We have about 88,000 libraries, colleges, corporations, schools in over 209 countries. We are a certified B Corp. What does that mean? B Corp means that it's a designation that a business is meeting the highest standards of performance, accountability, transparency, and those factors are related to our accounts, our customers, partners, and internally with our employees. We are a mission-driven company whose vision is to create a world enlightened by reading. And I don't want to step away from the slide without talking about Libby. So hopefully many of you are familiar with Libby. Libby is our reading app. You may be most familiar, if you don't already have an account with OverDrive for your academic library, with the Libby app as presented in public libraries. So if you are not familiar, I would encourage you to let us know if you want a demo, because we're happy to set that up for you. But it is a beloved app. Our librarians love it. People love using, our readers love reading Libby, and it's won many awards. So we'll talk a little bit about Libby as we get further along in the presentation. Next slide, please. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the content we provide. So it's growing faster than any digital catalog on the market today. We partner, as I mentioned, with over 30,000 large, small, medium-sized publishers. And those connections are really important. You know, we talk about partnership a lot at Overdrive, and that partnership extends not just to our accounts, but also to our relationships with publishers. We've been in this, we've been working with publishers for many, many years, and those relationships run deep and allow us to present a really wide selection of digital content. And that content can be from trade publishers, university presses, some more specific academic content. I have some logos here from some of the publishers that are offered in our catalog. One area that I see the greatest expansion right now is in international content. So it's in content in languages other than English. And that content isn't just published here in the United States, it's working with publishers across the globe. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit about me and about OverDrive. So we're going to ask you a question. So does your library participate in a consortia? And the answers are yes, one, yes, more than one, or no. And you should be able to click one of those responses and we'll have the results of the poll in just a second here. Great. So the majority of the folks on this webinar, the majority of you do participate in at least one consortium. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to focus on digital content consortia, but this is important information to give us a sense of who all is with us today. So thank you for participating. So let's start with some challenges. Josh mentioned that we're going to talk about challenges and solutions in this webinar. So I work with librarians and administrators every day, all the time, and I hear four major concerns or challenges facing academic libraries right now. The first is lower or stagnant budgets. The second is less staff to do more work. The third is at the time that we have lower budgets and less staff, we have an increased demand for digital content, especially audiobooks. And overall, we're looking for more support for student wellness and success. Next slide, please. So let's talk about budgets. So we have some specific data that we pulled that is reinforcing what you're feeling, and that is library budgets have not kept pace with the escalation of the database prices. Staffing has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. And the money that's coming in from states has fallen, in addition to some challenges with enrollment, particularly with smaller liberal arts colleges. So we have a slide that sort of represents that data both, and next slide, please. Thank you. So this data represents what you're feeling as well. You know, budgets are the same or going lower. There's been a little bit of an uptick in 2023, but not significant. Next slide, please. The next category is less staff to do more work. So it depends on your library, but generally speaking, I'm looking at the little chart over here on the side. When I look at full-time librarian staffing numbers, and again, we pulled all this data in 2012, we have a number of 38,000 plus. In 2022, 32,000 plus. So that's a significant drop in staffing. So it's increased a little bit since COVID, but hasn't kept pace with pre-COVID numbers. And one thing that I'm also hearing is that you may have some stability in staffing, but you're also asked to do more, right? I hear that often that libraries, particularly in community colleges, your roles are shifting a little bit and you're taking on more responsibility. Next slide, please. Another graph to show the student to librarian ratio is historically low. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about audiobooks. So what we know is that audiobooks are surging in popularity and circulation. Now, we didn't ask a quiz or a poll for this question, but if you're like me, audiobooks have become my go-to format for my personal reading. I even have a tag in Libby that I keep track of my favorite narrators. So I'm a little bit of a narrator groupie. Um, and so all of the information around audiobooks and the surge in popularity makes sense, right? Because we're all multitasking. We're doing multiple things at one time. We're listening while we're driving. We're listening while we're walking. And that's the same on campus. So we're not seeing anything different in terms of the general trend to increase circulation in audiobooks at academic libraries. Um, and there's a lot of flexibility in content. We're seeing more and more content, more and more backlist titles being published in the audiobook format. And an important thing to note with audiobooks, they do support accessibility standards by having options that cater to diverse learning styles. And I think this is really important as we're looking to support accessibility and open content on campus. Next slide, please. So let's talk about Libby and audiobooks. So Libby is a terrific app to support audiobook listening. There's a lot of features, including 48 playback speeds. There's multilingual support. You can listen offline, which is really helpful if you're walking with no Wi-Fi. And there's a variety of formats, of course, that you can access in Libby, including audiobooks. You know, we are a company of readers, and one of our conversations around the water cooler, as they say, is the speed in which we listen to audiobooks at OverDrive. So we are a little geeky about that here. I have just gotten to 1.4 speed, and I know that our senior manager and our team boasts about 1.6. So it is something that we listen to, and it's something that we use Libby in order to support our reading. Next slide, please. And the last thing to cover in terms of need is the increased need for student wellness and success. You know, just this week, I saw an article in a periodical about academic campuses that talked about student loneliness and how that's increasing. So we are seeing rising mental health challenges, anxiety, burnout. Um, Demand for inclusive and accessible learning. Tools are rising. Audiobooks is one solution, but overall, digital provides support for that. And providing materials that support curriculum and support student learning. I will also say that I think digital content, digital ebooks and audiobooks have a special place for student wellness. It's totally anonymous what folks are reading. So students who may have challenges in the classroom, challenges with peers, challenges with family, they don't need to walk into a public place to find a book. They can open Libby and find a title that's been selected by their library that really meets their needs, and they can get the support that they need. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about solutions. And to do that, we have invited Mike Backus to share the story and success of the Northern New York Library Digital consortium with OverDrive, lots of words. Meg has been the executive director of the Northern New York Library Network since 2018. She holds an MSLIS degree from Syracuse University School of Information and worked in public libraries before moving to lead this multi-type library consortium. I will say personally that Meg is a wonderful collaborator and partner. I enjoy working with her. I always learn something about the needs of libraries when we talk. And one example of a recent collaboration that's been very successful was a membership drive that OverDrive helped to facilitate more library participation. And we called it Consortium Connect. We held it in June. So far, I think, Meg, we have about 5 new libraries that joined the consortium. So it's been a great partnership overall. And I'm going to pass to you to talk about your consortium.
Thanks, Tracy. Let me just tell you a little bit about the consortium that I lead. I'm Meg Backus. I'm the executive director of the Northern New York Library Network, which is a nonprofit consortium that connects all types of libraries in a rural region of New York. We're up along the St. Lawrence River, the border with Canada. And there's like Adirondack Park is in our region. It's a really beautiful area. And my office exists to provide a network of collaboration and support to help my library members meet their goals for the ultimate benefit of the library users. It's a very like pragmatic mission. It's kind of wonderful to work with such kind of flexibility to just help library workers. So on the slide here, you see a partial breakdown of our membership. There's also some other, like you see, I've got 65 library members, but then I don't tell you who they all are. I account for, 47 of them. There's also some prison libraries and a couple hospital libraries, some public libraries. But the point here is that as a consortium, my office is always looking for areas of shared need and where those needs can be met with solutions that provide some like economies of scale to serve multiple members with shared resources. And so we do this in all kinds of ways. Under services here, this is just a selection of things that we do, but we license databases that then all of our members have access to. We do a lot with digitization. It's a whole suite of services. We provide training, equipment. We host online repositories for people to put their digitized items because we have a lot of special collections in our membership. We have interlibrary loan tools and delivery services. We do professional training programs. We give project grants to member institutions. We give travel grants to the staff of those member institutions. If anyone here is part of a consortium and wants like a super helpful service to explore, get somebody to retain an attorney for everyone to be able to ask their questions to. And we do this. It's been so wonderful and helpful. And then the lawyer answers HR questions and legal questions about like copyright, like information related legal questions and like something that is work related. And then she generalizes the answers. She gives the member their specific answer and then generalizes that answer or anonymizes it. And then we publish it into a searchable knowledge base. And it's a pretty impressive resource that we're building all like in time as people ask their actual questions that they're facing. We're going to focus now on one service. It's a shared OverDrive collection to one of our member segments, academic libraries. And so you've just gotten a little picture of what OverDrive is, what it has, how it works, or like how Libby works anyway. We use it in our consortium, and it is serving in my region, which again is just the northern part of the state of New York. I've got 10 academic libraries, and there's 3 that participate in this OverDrive, this shared OverDrive collection. And that number, the shared collection started in 2011, so far as I know. I started here, as Tracy, I think, said, in 2018. In 2011, the collection started with 3 academic members participating. In 2018, when I got here, there were still 3 participating. It was a different 3 than, like some came and went, new ones joined, others dropped after trying it. And I saw that these 3 members would benefit if more schools joined, and I need more than my 10 members to be able to join in. And OverDrive was game for not restricting who participates, so long as it's within the market, like in their market segment of academic libraries. And so there are 8 other regional consortia just like mine in the state of New York. And so I worked with them to extend access to all of their member libraries that are academic libraries to be able to join. And so then year after year, we just have picked up a handful of libraries. And so now we're up to 19 schools participating. Mostly, it seems that they serve that this shared collection serves smaller organizations. Like one of those that's under 2,000 students has 750 student FTE. It's really little. It's the only university in Adirondack Park. It's a beautiful little place. So we have a mix of public and private schools, which is kind of rare in New York. We've got the big like state university system, and those schools all share systems all the time, but it's rare that they can directly share with private schools, or that private schools get to get in on those shared systems in the same way that the public schools get to. So it's a mix of public and private. And there's a lot of community colleges, like half, I guess. When I say a lot, I'm talking like, I believe there are 9 community colleges out of the 19. So I'll mention that the group of 19 of us are ourselves not a formal consortium. All of the schools are members of their own regional library consortia, and those are formal relationships with like membership criteria and bylaws and governance structures and all of that. The group of 19, we're just piggybacking on that structure, saying if you are a member in good standing of your local library consortium, you are eligible to join in on this shared digital collection. So the group of 19 here is a pretty informal group. We just have a shared ebook collection, and that's all this group of 19 does together. So that, I don't know, it makes it a pretty simple arrangement. And as far as OverDrive is concerned, they don't care, so far as I know, whether you've got a formal structure for the group of people working together, or you've all just agreed, like, we want to share ebooks to maximize the investment. And so there's, 4 of us who want to do it, and I think you can just do it. So why would anyone want to do that? Why do my members or participants like this resource? The main thing is like exactly what you would expect, that the librarians want to be able to add content in accessible formats in a way that stretches their local dollars, that they're filling gaps in their print collection, they're responding to requests from students and faculty, they're able to fit this into their collection development policies by supporting lit programs. But then they're also supporting like recreational reading and some of those wellness titles, or some of those titles that are there to support students in like wellness and self-help and adulting kind of categories of books that Tracy was talking about. They also like that they get to benefit from the time or expertise or analysis of colleagues in other institutions, that they just have to collect a little bit, and because they're part of this pool, they get access to everything that everyone else collects, and it's all a like flat pool. There's no tiered access. We can talk a little bit more about options that exist for that, or like where we can talk about that later. But the like general principle here is that it's a shared pool. Anything that one institution buys, another institution has the exact same access to those items as the institution that selected it. And this is also coming out of like, ebooks are not easy to share. It's really hard to get the same sharing and the same like benefit of a library holding or an ebook as you get for a print book, which can be interlibrary loaned, where an ebook cannot. And so getting into a shared pool is a admittedly modest workaround. It is a workaround in some, you know, by however you look at it. Like, this is a way for institutions to share ebooks, that they, you know, to get access to other people's ebooks that the other people paid for. Just as a note, the reasons that libraries give for not joining, because everybody likes the idea. There's nobody out there who's like, no way, I don't want any ebooks for my campus or audio books for my campus. They just say, like, literally, we have no budget for it, or they might say they have no capacity to add anything new or promote something new. Sometimes it doesn't fit the collection development strategy, you know, like, oh, recreational reading, cool, of course that's fun and we love it and we're in favor of it, but it's not what my library is doing right now. Or they say that they rely on their public systems or their public libraries to give access to ebooks and downloadable audiobooks for their students and faculty by virtue of their campus being within the service area of a public library. And so they all have, you know, they can have their students have public library cards. And those are all legit. In my region, I compared the academic collection that my members had built with the public collections that my public libraries here had built, and was really surprised to find how little overlap there was. I can't remember the percentage. I shouldn't even be mentioning it if I don't know the percentage, but it was like less than 20% overlap. So the academic collection does seem to be and this wouldn't always be the case, but in my case, the collections that the public libraries were building were different from the collections the academic libraries were building, even though most of the academic libraries participating with me are trying to build a recreational reading, or like that is part of their strategy. They also, some of the librarians say this is a way for them to include foreign language materials. Some say this is a way to make sure the students have access to the banned or challenged books as they appear on, or like as banned and challenged books show up on lists, they can make sure that their students have access to those titles. And then I want to mention how we do this, just logistically. How do we do this? We keep it simple, or at least it seems simple to me. Every school has an annual fee My office pays the big lump sum invoice and then invoices each participating member. And then we assign the appropriate credits, like content credits for each of those schools. We schedule 3 purchases during the year, a fall purchase, a winter purchase, and a spring purchase. If schools want to make purchases in between those times on top of their annual fee, then usually they talk to Tracy about making an Advantage account, and that's the Advantage accounts are what I was saying, like we can talk about that later if we want to. But for their annual fee, all of that gets spent on this schedule 3 times a year. And each school has control over what they select to add to the collection. So they have permission to create a cart, but they don't have permission to purchase on the consortial account. So they create their carts by the deadline that we give them. And then when that deadline comes, we merge all the carts and press buy, and then it all gets added to the collection. And the agreements about just, you know, how the collection is built, how the content credits are spent each year, we do make my office keeps an eye on titles that are expiring that have active holds on them, titles that are expiring that have high circulation numbers. And if there are titles that are expiring that meet those criteria, we will repurchase those titles with the group's money because it protects the user experience for everybody. So everybody pitches in on those things that benefit everybody. We also buy mark records with the pool of content credits. So that's like what everyone agrees to. And we have a document that lays out how we share and what everyone's responsibility is that participates in this collection. And it's written in plain English. It's less than 2 pages long. And anyone who is going to join has to read it, and that like they sign up by like signing that form. And it's great. Like I think everyone, it's pretty low key. And the we also make it clear that like when a new school joins, they inherit everything. Like they just come into the pool and they have access to everything. There's no like firewall between when they started. Like they all the content that's ever been built, they have access to. It's just a big pool. If they want to leave the consortium, no problem. They don't get to take anything with them. They leave it behind for everybody else who's still in the consortium. And so it's not, I want to say it's not that heavy of a lift for anyone so far as I can tell. Here's a little glimpse of what we've built. Currently, we have 3,579 titles in the collection. So that's after, you know, what has it been, like 14 years or something. So it's not a huge collection. There's 5,583 copies. So some titles have multiple copies, including like if the lending model is for 100 simultaneous users, then one title will have 100 copies attached to it. So that's how you get the titles being less than the copies. Well, of course, you know that. There's the breakdown of the proportion of the collection that's audiobooks compared to ebooks. And the audiobooks are a new emphasis for most of the participating schools, that they had always heavily been buying ebooks, and they've just shifted into thinking audiobooks actually serves their student body probably better in a lot of cases. And so they've shifted into buying more audiobooks, seeing that the audiobooks circulate better than the ebooks. But the kind of headline here for all of them is, if you look at just last year, so fiscal year 23-24. At that time, there were 13 schools. So Tracy said 5 just joined. That's true. So 13 plus 5 is not 19. I thought there were 13 schools last year. Maybe there were 14. Each school bought an average of 28 new titles. So when you think about like the workload there, that's 28 titles on average that the selectors are making over 3 purchases. So every time there's one of those 3 purchases, they need to find 7, 8, 9 titles to throw into their cart, which is not a huge, and there's a lot of tools that, depending on how deep they want to get with it, they can make it fast or they can make it slow. But, and I mean the tools would help them make it go fast. But, you know, some have really, we did a diversity audit on the, or like OverDrive did a diversity audit for our collection and gave a presentation to the group about what was in our collection, where there's lists to build a more diverse collection, or, you know, depending on what the goals are. So some of the schools have been working from those resources to build a more diverse collection. But the point I'm making is that each school bought an average of 28 titles last year, and overall 359 titles were bought were added to the collection. So you buy 28 with your own content credits, but you got 359 new titles for your campus. So like the cost benefit there is pretty attractive to most of my libraries here. It feels like buying one and getting 13 free. It's not like that's what every public library out there does. I mean, just about. There's standalone public libraries, OverDrive accounts, but for the most part, public libraries roll in together on these things. And academic libraries will stand up their own ebook collection that only their campus can use and only their campus pays for. And so we're just trying to create a better economy for the ebooks with those library budgets. You can see down in the bottom right corner here the cost per checkout. In 2011, when we first started and the collection was really small and the number of participants were really small, the cost per checkout was $24, just under. And then with a bigger collection and more users and more people sharing it, the cost per checkout is on average for each of these schools $5.56. So that's a pretty good cost per use. According, like the academic libraries tolerate much higher cost per use figures. So it, you know, everyone who participates in my region has been like the 3 that our members now have been constant for as long as I've been here, for like 6 years. And there was some, and some of them before that. But I think that's everything that I wanted to share.
Hey, Meg, thank you so much for all of that information. And thank you for compiling the data and sharing it with us. Let's go back to, there we go. That's the slide for next. So Meg talks specifically about the Northern New York Library Network. I'm going to kind of spread out a little bit here and talk generally about how Consortia works with OverDrive. So we talked about, Meg shared how a shared collection enables member libraries to pull resources. So I love this diagram here because it shows that the libraries are buying the books and then they're sharing them. So that's essentially a good diagram to represent how the structure of consortia's work. Purchase titles are available to all participating libraries through a central access point. Of course, with OverDrive, that's the fabulous Libby. Next slide, please. But there's a couple of additional things to point out. And these are real benefits that OverDrive offers. The first of all is that flexibility with structure. Meg talked about how billing is centralized for the Northern New York Library Network. I have consortia that also have centralized billing, and I have consortia that don't have centralized billing, where each participating library is billed directly for their contract agreement fee. So that flexibility allows consortia to develop and build in a way that best suits everyone's needs. Also, flexibility with how titles are reviewed and purchased. So, with Northern New York Library Network, Meg shared that they purchase 3 times a year, and each library selects a cart of titles, and then those purchases are combined and bought together. And that's a really great structure, but that's not the only structure that we can accommodate. So I have consortia where each library is buying individually. Um, and of course, everything that they buy is shared. I have some consortia where all of the purchasing is centralized by a committee of librarians from the consortia, and that committee may rotate. I also have a combo um, consortia where a small percentage of the budget is directed to purchasing by the consortia, and then a larger pool is directed by each individual library. So lots of choices in terms of flexibility and how the consortia can best be structured. And then Meg also mentioned, she started with the individual Northern New York Library Network Consortia, and they expanded to include other consortia in Northern New York. How your consortia is organized is not a consideration for building an OverDrive consortia. So what do I mean by that? If you are already participating in a consortia, that consortia can approach us and set up a digital content consortia with OverDrive. If you're a group of libraries that want to pull together to build a consortia, absolutely reach out to us. We have one large consortia in North Carolina that's all community colleges, for example. 2 key things to note. One is that all consortiums need to be within state lines. That's because of licensing, publisher licensing rules. And the second is we like to have at least 3 libraries to start. You want to have some libraries to start. And then one additional thing that's important to note with OverDrive Consortia, and Meg mentioned this, and that's Advantage. So what's Advantage? Advantage is a bonus account that we offer to consortia libraries, individual libraries, where they can buy titles specifically for their campus, right? It's over and above what the consortium offers, and it is separately funded from the consortia. But a lot of libraries like that choice where if they have a community read, if they have a need for a particular title in the classroom, if they have, if their students are just crazy about comics and you have extra money for that subject area, you can use this bonus account called Advantage to build a collection for your campus that you can also share with the consortium if that's something that you want to do. Next slide, please. Oh, we're time for questions. One thing before I have a question for you, Meg, and that is you did mention the diversity audit. And just a second to talk about diversity audits at OverDrive. I love this feature, and thank you so much for mentioning it. We have the ability to analyze a collection based on a set number of categories. What I like about our diversity audit is it's not prescriptive. It's reflective of a collection that we share with accounts. And from there, you guys can decide, accounts can decide what their priorities are. Diversity can mean a lot of different things at different campuses at different parts of the country. So if you are already an OverDrive account or are interested in learning more, I really love the effectiveness of a diversity audit for collection development building. But before we go to questions from you all, Meg, I just wondered if I have two specific questions I wanted to ask. And one is related to time. You talked about that, but we did mention that as one of the challenges right now for academic libraries. Are you getting any particular feedback on how purchasing 3 times a year really supports the other um, challenges in terms of staffing and time management that libraries are experiencing?
Yeah, this is something that we have talked about as a group, um, where we learned that more frequent purchases can actually increase circulation. And my group, the people who do the selection, were like, 3 times a year, we're good. Like, it was more valuable for them to be able to just have to dip in to make their OverDrive purchases 3 times a year than it was to have to be like figuring out some kind of rolling thing or more frequently. Like, there's only so many emails they want with deadline information. Like, they're gonna take that 3 times a year and be happy about it, and they didn't want to add more to it. And I think part of that is just being able to constrain the time commitment for those member libraries, because as soon as you get into anything, it can expand infinitely, feels like. And so this is they put a real clear limit on that conversation. Like, this, we can handle this, we don't really want to change it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. As we were preparing for this webinar, I was looking at your collection overall, and I was really excited to see um, particular subject areas emerge. One is medical and nursing. The other one is language learning titles. There's some juvenile content, which I suppose support education programs. And can you talk a little bit about any trends that you're seeing in terms of the collection growing? I really like what you said about comparing your collection to the public library. Anything else that you can add to fill that out would be interesting, I think.
Yeah, what to say about this? Um it's a little bit of a decision to say every school that participates is going to select according to their own fancies, rather than to say we have a coordinated collection development policy and this collection is going to be for X, Y, and Z. We do not impose that kind of a collection policy on anyone. And so that results in a collection that can have random stuff in it. There's a school that is using this to support their health sciences program, and they're buying nursing stuff, and they are super happy to have this as an option for those students. I haven't looked at whether any other schools are borrowing those items. I'd be curious, because the whole idea is that other people are benefiting from everybody else's purchasing. But maybe if you're purchasing so niche and in other schools you're not marketing, like you're not promoting, I don't know what happens. So I liked hearing that I'm repeating myself a bit, but I liked hearing that some people are collecting the banned and challenged books with the reasoning that, like, not only are those books now like they have their own intrinsic value as literature, but they also now have cultural value for these college students who can then like be engaging with something that's going on in the world, like what's threatening about these ideas, and who wants to limit access to it and why, and what's motivated. Like those are all interesting concepts for college students to be wrestling with. So I liked that the college librarians were feeling like having a resource to add banned and challenged books is kind of doing a lot. Like there's a lot of impact on the collection or like on their offerings when they do that. So yeah, I guess that's all I want to say about trends. It can, it's not heavily coordinated centrally.
That's really helpful. I know that there's varying as consortiums are structured differently. There's a lot of different approaches to collection development, and I think that that's key. The key is to have a philosophy or standard or strategy. It doesn't matter if it's loose or very specific. It does help if there's shared understanding. So it's great to hear that you guys do have something, but it's not as formal as, say, your consortia agreements within each consortia. So thank you for sharing that information. Josh, I'm going to see, I see we're getting at 2:50 in terms of time. Is there any questions that came in from the folks listening that we want to direct to Meg?
Yes, yeah, thank you again for that insightful conversation on collection development trends. We have had some good questions that have come through that we'd like to introduce and expand the conversation a bit. So the first I have here is, what recommendations do you have for a library looking to involve their consortium in the new digital library? And I think that
I
could go
missed
to
it.
either.
What was your question? I was reading. That was bad form. I'm sorry.
No problem. Yeah, so what recommendations might you have for a library looking to involve their consortium in a new digital library?
I don't know if you have answers, Tracy. I would. One of my first thoughts is about patience, where if you're starting out, it is kind of slow going at first. Unless you're going to be dropping a whole bunch of money in a starting collection, it's a slow build. So get with as many people as you can and like throw as much at a starting collection as you can, but otherwise be patient. That like slow and steady will get you somewhere.
Yeah, and we have a lot of open access content too, which is great for opening collection. This is free content by terrific publishers like University of Michigan Press, Taylor and Francis. It's a great way to seed your opening collection for consortia. If what we tend to do if we're approached by a consortia or individuals within a consortia is the first thing we do is provide a lot of information. So we'll have a town hall like meeting where we'll go through, what does it mean to have an OverDrive consortia? And we may need to do that a couple of times to see if people are interested in participating. Knowledge is key. And as I said, there's so much flexibility that sometimes it does take a little bit of time to go through all of the choices. So the first step would be, reach out to us, ask questions, and as Meg said, talk to other member libraries and see if this is something that you would like to investigate.
Those are some great answers. Thank you. I have one upvoted answer here. Let me know if this is appropriate, but what's the cost or what will be the cost to participate and download the, I'm guessing, cataloging data? Is that really something that we want to answer here?
Yeah, so we do have a fee structure, and what I would recommend is we can reach out to you individually to kind of go through what that fee structure is. And we're happy to provide all that information offline.
Great. I have another one here that came through just recently. Let's see, Meg, do you have any suggestions or improvements for OverDrive's consortium program?
Not a ton. Like I have to say, like I don't for most services that I would offer outside of my specific region, I would be charging some kind of administrative fee for letting other people come in and like dealing with all of the work it involves to like manage a program. I don't charge any kind of administrative fee or any I don't add any costs on top of the OverDrive fees because it's not hard to manage. So I don't know what my members would say. If I feel like the program is pretty well supported by OverDrive. I'll get a question from somebody about something they want to do in the OverDrive marketplace, which is the back end where you make all your selections or make your reports or whatever. And if I don't have time to answer it, I will just forward it to Tracy and say, will you take this one? And she does. And that kind of support is pretty special. Like that's not common that I have that kind of a working relationship with the vendor. So I don't know. I don't.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Meg. I saw a couple of questions come in where they're talking about costs and how much effort things go into the consortium. You mentioned that really well before, but I have one question about what's the contribution or workload required for each member to participate in a digital library consortium? I think that could go either to you or Meg, to Meg or Tracy here. I think that it's a great question because people want to know what the actual output might be.
On my side, I mentioned we have this document that everybody looks at and agrees to before they join, and it's less than 2 pages, and it's just really simple language, and it is really clear about the labor, which is you're going to select 3 times a year, you're going to fill a cart by a certain deadline. It's really there was a time when we were talking about making lists, or like if you've used Libby before, you've seen certain curated lists in that app, and we've talked about whether we should have each participating school make some of those lists, and it turns out you can automate the creation of those lists, and everyone was fine with that. So the work is not nothing, but if you're a librarian who's already doing collection development, I think the biggest amount of work can be the process of like getting your school signed up in its own bureaucratic processes. Like, I don't think that the work of participating is hard. I think depending on how easy or hard it is to purchase in your university, that's the thing that takes the most time. It's just like getting things signed, and does the renewal require, like, when can the renewal happen? We need a new purchase order number. Like, some of that bureaucratic stuff, I think, is the part that takes the most labor, and that's usually coming from, I don't know, like the financial people, or sometimes the library director has to deal with that, but it's what they have to deal with for every purchase.
Yeah, the one thing to add on to that, I mean, I think it really varies, but it's certainly much less than if you were building a collection on your own, right? One thing that Meg does that I strongly recommend, in addition to the individual building carts time of year, is having like an annual meeting. Um, and that's really helpful to level set in terms of what's happening, updates to Libby, updates to our backend portal marketplace. I give overviews of statistics. So that would be the one additional thing that I would recommend in terms of time. But that's once a year, an hour and a half max.
Great, thank you. There are quite a few questions that did come in, so if we don't get to them, we'll try to answer them as needed, but I'm gonna pick another one here. It really seems to focus on, say, state lines or other territories. So, I got one question that asked, is this available to universities in the Caribbean, Jamaica, for example? It sounds like, do we offer consortia options outside the US, perhaps?
I don't know the answer to that. So that's something we'll have to get back with you on. I know that because I work within the US, I'm familiar with that, but we can absolutely find that out for you.
Great. Yeah, we'll definitely find that out for you. Thank you, Leslyn. There's one more. Our organization spans multiple states, which has made joining or working with a consortium difficult. Do you have any advice for getting past the multi-state barrier?
Yeah, the best thing is to work with us and give us all of the information, and then we'll approach our teams internally and see. It's sort of outside of our control because it's about licensing, but it's worth pursuing to the next level. If we have information about the bylaws of the organization, we can talk to folks internally and get a sense whether that's something that we can pursue. So I wouldn't automatically walk away from it. It's a let's find out more information.
Always a good course of action. I think we're at time. Sabrina or Ashley, do we want to finish this off?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Josh. I'll just say thanks so much to Meg, Tracy, and Josh for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.